Hello and welcome to this video and to something that I haven't done for a while, and that is a book unhaul. So I have about 35 books here to discuss with you, ranging from like children's, middle grade, a couple of YAs, and then some adult fiction and non-fiction. And the reason why I haven't done one of these for a while is because we've been moving about, as you may have seen across my videos over the last 8 months or so. So it has meant that I've not had access at points to some of my books. A lot of these books now that you can see behind me have been living at my parents' house for probably a decade or longer if they're, you know, my old children's books. So they've come into my new home and I sorted them all out. There's a whole video of me getting these bookshelves. Well, Pete built the bookshelves and then I added stuff up, so I'll link that above for you, which meant that there were books that I no longer had the interest of rereading or having on my shelves anymore, which is why this is a larger book unhaul than perhaps I've done in the past, just for that fact. Because if you haven't been here for a long time, I tend to read about 5 books a month. So we're working on about 1 book a week for the year. My goal is like 52 and it has been consistently for a number of years, which means that I don't tend to have a lot of books to get rid of, and when I do, I keep hold of them for a while to make sure that there is no pull for them, and then I send them off into the world in some way. So yeah, it just so happens that there's a lot of them this time, and without further ado, let's get into it. So I thought I'd start with the children's books or middle grade books that I have, and we're going to go with Forever Amber Brown and Amber Brown Goes Forth by Paula Danziger. She is an author that I enjoyed as a younger person, and these two, I no longer have the urge to read them, and I also think that these are like 2 random ones in a series and I don't have the complete series. I have kept Remember Me to Harold Square and Thames Doesn't Rhyme with James because I want to reread those, but these ones being at random points in a series, they can leave my possession. I have 4 and fine books here that I'm going to be getting rid of. I enjoyed them again when I was younger, but these are not ones that I particularly want to reread. Again, I have kept some of my Anne Fine collection. If you remember my 48-hour reading of the Puffin books, I read Flower Babies. That one's kept, and I've got a few others that I'd quite like to reread to see if I want to keep them. But the ones that didn't make the cut were The Diary of the Killer Cat, which I did like as a child quite a lot, The Country Pancake, The Chicken Gave It To Me, and How to Write Really Badly. They will be going. And the last one that is in the children's book section is The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle. I read this as part of my random number generated TBR in April. I really liked the first half, didn't like the second half. Don't intend to reread, so that's now going to be leaving my collection. We move on to the YA. There's only 3 of these. One's a non-fiction that I got in Cosmopolitan magazine way back when, and that's a little book about 100 ways to release your inner flirt. And as an introverted teenager, I found this quite useful. I know that sounds really stupid, but essentially it told me to do everything that you would think about, you know, eye contact and all of that kind of stuff. So although I didn't, you know, use this as rote learning, it did just give me the confidence to try, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So I must have got this when I was about 14, and it just gave me that boost that I needed to put myself out there a little bit more. But I'm now married, so I feel like I no longer need this, and it might be useful to some other introverted teen out there. More recent books, so I'm going to get rid of Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This is a retelling of the Twilight novel from Edward's perspective. I found that Edward just went on a bit. It's a very thick book. If I'm gonna reread Twilight, I'm gonna reread Twilight. I don't need it from his perspective. So it's a big book that I don't need on my shelves anymore. Similarly, the next one is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games series. And I did enjoy this book, and I did find it interesting how they came up with the Hunger Games in this world. But there was more of it that I didn't like, or that I wasn't that interested in, and I'm a person with a snake phobia. There's an awful lot of snakes in this. They're also releasing a film of this soon. I was only really keeping hold of it in case Pete wanted to read it because he read the Hunger Games trilogy, but he doesn't really have any interest, so it can leave and go to somebody else who will enjoy it far more than I probably did. And again, it's a thick book that doesn't need to remain on my shelves. But I am interested in watching the film, but I'll have to do that in the comfort of my own home so I can hide at all the snaky bits. Alright, let's move on to adult non-fiction. The first one isn't my book, it's Pete's, and that's the Alan Sugar autobiography, which again is a very chunky book. It takes up a lot of space on the shelves. I do not want to read it. Pete does not want to read it anymore. It can leave. Another one is This Book Will Make You Sleep. I can't remember who it's by. Oh, there we go. Dr. Jessamy Hibbard and Joe Uzma. This is part of a series of This Book Will Make You, so there's confident, calm and happy. I bought this for Pete because he always complained he couldn't sleep. Again, he has no intention of reading it. I have read it and there were a few interesting bits, but I don't intend on reading it again, so bye-bye. This was bought for me by Pete a very long time ago, way back in probably the Christmas of 2012, just before we went to Australia. So this is Bill Bryson Down Under. It was interesting before we went, although it did make me think that literally everything was going to kill me in Australia, but I again have no interest in rereading it. I've got a few Bill Bryson on my Kindle if I ever want that sort of travel writery fix, so again it's time for this one to leave the collection. And the last one in the adult non-fiction is How to Be a Woman by Caitlin Moran. I've ummed and ahed about keeping this book for quite a while, but quite frankly I've got no draw to read it again, and I don't remember absolutely loving it when I read it the first time. I read this pre-YouTube channel, pre-rating books, so I feel like if I ever want to read it I can probably get it somewhere else, like the library or something, so I don't think there's a need to keep this one anymore. Right, let me pull this stack over. So we're now into the adult fiction books. The first one is Two Steps Forward by Graham Simison. I never know how to pronounce his surname. He's the guy that wrote the Rosie Project and that series. And Anne Boyce, who also has a surname I don't know how to pronounce. I believe they're husband and wife, but could have got that wrong. But this is following Zoe and Martin, who are doing the, and I can never remember the name of the walk, the one to Santiago de Compostela, the big walk across Spain. Actually, a couple of my friends did it last summer in preparation for their big trip to South America, but that's by the by. I enjoyed this book. It was a good summer read, but there was nothing totally wow about it, so I gave it a very middle of the road rating. I don't feel the urge to read it again, so now that it's gone to my mum and now back to me, it can go into the world to find a new home. The next is a series. I was intrigued when it came out. This is a long time ago. Not really sure why they were still on my shelves, so it's definitely time for them to go, but I've heard that charity shops don't want them anymore, and that's the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy. I don't really need to go into this one, do I? You know about this one, so yeah, all three books, they're going. This might offend some people, but I'm gonna be getting rid of The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. This has a lot of hype. It's a bestseller. I found it a bit too depressing for me. I was glad I've read it, but I definitely won't be reading it again, and that just means there's no point in keeping it on my shelves, and let there be space for other books that I do want to read again. When I was a teenager, young adult, 17, I went through a real big Cecilia Ahern phase where I basically bought everything that she came out with, and then she went into a phase where she went very magical realism and it went a bit weird and I wasn't a big fan. So I've kept some of her books, the ones that I did enjoy, and then there are 3 here that I won't be keeping. The first is The Gift by Cecilia Ahern. This is based around Christmas and is about a man who wishes he could be in 2 places at once. And then there was a homeless man called Gabe who sits outside his office and sort of wonderful life's him. But I remember it being a bit odd and I didn't enjoy it quite as much. So The Gift can go to the charity shop and hopefully someone will have a lovely time at Christmas. The next one is Cecilia Ahern again, and that's If You Could See Me Now. These books I read so long ago that I don't remember them as well as possibly should. But maybe that's another reason why they shouldn't be kept. But I remember it being, again, a bit magical realism and a little bit far-fetched for me. And then the last Cecilia Ahern is A Place Called Here, and this was all about things disappearing from what I remember. They go into some land of disappeared things, but again, I have no intention of rereading, so let it out into the world. The next, 5 books are from a box set I had from a little black dress book. So a little black dress must be like sort of the publishers, or at least a part of a publisher, and I had this massive box set of these romances. They're like modern day Mills and Boon. So I read the backs of all of these when I was sorting out my shelves, and these 5 didn't make the cut. Largely because I felt that they would irritate me because they're like whiny rich people now. There may have been some other reasons. But the first one was True Love and Other Lies by Whitney Gaskell. This is about a travel writer, Claire, who's kissed enough frogs, and without a shadow of doubt that fate, love at first sight, and the one does not exist. But then she sits next to somebody on a plane and he's like the one, but he's already with somebody else. Wasn't really interested in that. The next one was I Take This Man by Valerie Frankel. The tagline is whether he likes it or not, and that didn't sit very well with me because, we like people to have a say in their lives. But she's left standing at the altar by her fiancé. She doesn't know how to react, so they go and kidnap him, essentially. Which could be fun, but I don't like the tagline. The Trouble with Valentine's Day by Rachel Gibson. A woman doesn't like Valentine's Day. She runs away to a small town, meets someone who she probably wouldn't normally. Things get steamy in a supermarket of all places, and then they become the town gossip. I actually remember this one a bit. Falling Out of Fashion by Karen Yampolsky. This just had no airheads, no airbrushing, no air kissing, and was about a magazine, sort of fashion magazine, and again, not what I'm into at the moment. And the last one was Single Teeny, and it was about it girls, and again, not my vibe these days. The next one was another book that is of a similar vein to the little black dress books, but not. And this is West End Girls by Jenny Colgan. I'm pretty sure I've read it, but I don't remember it at all. But on the back, it's about 2 sisters who are complete opposites. But again, it was all sort of it girls and that kind of stuff, and whiny people that I just wasn't interested in at the moment. Another book like the Caitlin Moran one that I ummed and ahed about getting rid of for a long time was Uncommon Type by Tom Hanks. I kept thinking I was going to reread this before I got rid of it. Never got round to it. I'm not really into short stories, and I remember sort of thinking meh to most of these, so why put myself through that again? Sorry Tom Hanks, love your acting, wasn't a huge fan of your book, and I finally admitted it to myself and I'm going to get rid of it. So we're now into still adult fiction, but ones that I've actually read recently. And the first is going to hurt some people, but I'm going to get rid of Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is a sort of romance mystery tense doodah, which I had higher hopes for, and it didn't quite hit what I wanted. And also Colleen Hoover is very divisive, shall we say, and there's a lot of red flags in this book. So yeah, not going to reread. It's gone. My mum's read it as well now. So the next one is How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie. Had so much potential but just let me down. I ended up finding this kind of boring, which is a shame because it's got such a good cover and such a good title and such a good premise, but it just fell flat for me, so I won't want to reread that one, so that one can go. Book I did actually enjoy was Shari Lapina, An Unwanted Guest. Again, I read this as part of the random number generated TBR in April, and it was one of my favourite books of the month actually, but it was a closed singular location thriller, sort of abandoned hotel, not abandoned but solitary hotel, no one can get to it, snow, they get cut off, and then there's murders. And I did enjoy it, and it was twisty and it was fun. The only problem is that I guessed a lot of the twists, so thrillers in general are hard to reread because you know what's going to happen, but one where I guessed it on the first read, it's not one to keep and reread. But I did enjoy it and I would recommend it. The last book that I read of that April TBR, but I mentioned it in my May TBR, or my May wrap up, was A Vintage Friendship by Kathy Hopkins. This follows 4 friends who were like best mates in the 70s, said they were never gonna split up, and then one sort of goes awry. Well, they tend to break up, life gets in the way. 3 of them are still reasonably good friends and come together in the search of their missing friend, the one that they haven't seen or heard from for a long time. It was okay. If you want to hear more, I'll link my May wrap up for you. Again, in that May video was Another Life by Jodie Chapman. This has the tagline of "This is not a love story, this is a story about love," which is from my favourite film, 500 Days of Summer. They also use a similar thing. So I went into this with high hopes, but I just got more and more bored as we went through, so this one has got to go. And the last book that's going out of my collection on this occasion is Grown Ups by Marian Keyes. This is fine, enjoyable enough. It doesn't need to be 600 odd pages, so as a big hefty hardback it doesn't need to be kept in my collection. It has made me wonder about all the other Marian Keyes books that I've got on my shelf, because they are all chunky, and whether they need to be kept up, because this felt, even though it's a new release, pretty dated. But it was enjoyable enough. We followed the, what's their names? The Casey family, and we just went through their sort of family drama, and secrets came out and things like that. So enjoyable enough, too big, could go. So there you have it. There are all of the 30 odd books that I'm getting rid of, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any strong opinions about the books that I've gotten rid of, do let me know in the comments. It would be fun to hear your opinions, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!